Welcome to this new class, and we will start to add the details to the cape. We will move it closer to the neck, and we will use a zero measure on the mesh for have a clear polygon disposition. It's always better have a good mesh. For example, these large polygons that could generate a problem with the model, so you need to keep it like a square. I will not use anything different. I will use the move brush. Remember, activate the symmetry. And we'll start to organize this. Remember, take your time with this, step by step, layer by layer, because later you will fix a lot of errors. So it's better avoided. For example, here I've got a space. I will disable the transparency, the overlapping mesh, at this point, there is fine, I like it. I'll add a couple of subdivisions for add more detail and more folds. The first that I will do is the zero measure option. For that, I go to subtool, select the subtool that I need. I duplicate it because I could have an error with the mesh. I go to geometry panel and look for the zero measure option. I will move the target polygon count to, I guess that I will use 1 on this, because I want a simple manageable mesh. For that, I just click the zero measure. And as you can see here, I've got a very clear mesh. Excuse me, I will hide the first subtool. The zero measure try to adjust the polygons by using the shape that we got. For example, if we add a subdivision and a couple of folds on a mesh with the zero measure option, it will be easier to work than another mesh without the zero measure, because we don't got that rectangular polygons, and we've got a better mesh with a better polygons to work. I will add a subdivision, and I will activate the other subtool, the first one. And I want to use the project option. For that, I need to select this layer and have visible the other, the first one, with the details. I press Shift and the I, and it hides the other subtools. I go back without the shift and select the two layers that I want to work. And now I'll go to Project All, just in case I've lose a little bit of detail. And now I've got this. It will recover the polygonal shapes too. There is fine. Now I'll delete the first mesh. I select it and I press delete. Okay, and now I've got a better mesh to work with two subdivisions. Shift F for visualize better the mesh. And now I will just hide the tools that I need, like the chest, because it interacts with the cape. Now I want to visualize the mask too. Only the mask, because I don't need the face, but I need the mask. If I go too fast on this, remember, pause the video and keep modeling with me, because sometimes you could watch the complete class and miss some steps of the process. I will smooth this a little bit. For that I will use Shift and my actual brush. And I will use standard for create shapes. As I told you in the previous class, when I try to move this mesh, I can't. It is very difficult. But for that is the ghost option. And as you can see here too, this mesh is asymmetrical. So we could have some troubles in the future. We could resolve it now. We could see this part and now the other. There is two answers here. The mask is asymmetrical or the cape is asymmetrical. I'll select the cape because it is a simple mesh. I'll go to geometry. We don't have anything to lose on the cape. I'll go to topology and modify topology. And here I'll look for the option mirror and weld. It will mirror and weld the mesh, one side at the other. So it doesn't allow me to do this because I've got subdivision labeled. For that, I'll go to this part and press the lower. It is because we don't have so much to lose on this mesh. I'll press here. And you've got it here on geometry, the lower. And now we can't go back on the subdivisions. We've got a complete high polygon mesh. In this case, I'll go again to mirror and weld. And now the program copied the right side to the left side. And we've got a symmetrical mask and a symmetrical cape. In this case, the problem was the cape. I will work with the symmetry and a few zones. I will add some folds. Very similar to the reference. I will try to use the symmetry for the complete model, like the maximum possible. I'll select the standard brush and change the alpha for the alpha number 51. And by using Alt, I will invert the brush and create a low relief. I'll select a big brush. Then I use the normal brush without pushing the Alt key. If you don't get this, what I do is go to stroke and enable the lazy mouse and move it to 37. Remember, I create a low relief, then the normal brush, down, up. I'll move the lazy mouse. And I will create a fast folds on this part. I use Alt, then the normal brush. Remember, we need different volumes. And this one is just a basic sketch of our base mesh. Probably we will lose all these folds that we create, but we need it for create a sensation and for create the basic mesh. I will use move for adjust this mesh. At the end, what I want to do is fuse the mask and the cape. And for that we need the same level of detail on the mask and the same on the cape. For that we need to fuse the neck and the cape. I will move it a little bit through the mask because it will get that detail when I use a project option. And here will be a fusion with this detail and this other. We will do this very slow and step by step. At this point I want to create this shape. And for that I'll go to the superior view, the top view. I'll use Shift for snap the camera. And I will start to drag the shapes. We need to create an organic shape here. We pull out a bit the center part. We need to move in this part. And we need to move to the tip a little bit outer. I want to have this fall sensation here, and for that I'll use standard. I'll use a big brush. I pull this in and I smooth it. It helps me to create this curve. Remember that we are working with a low level of detail, so there is no problem if we lose a little bit of detail here. We've got a basic mesh. We need to have a very good basic mesh for keep the shape, the principal shape. I try to go very fast because remember I told you you need to give it the time, dedicate a little more. I'll start to pull out these zones. In this case I will use the symmetry, and later I will add asymmetrical details. For that I will modify the first folds that I create using the symmetry. For add that irregular shapes that add more realism to our character. I will smooth it. For that I will use the edge polish option. For move this mesh closer to the floor. We've got a basic horrible mesh here. But the main idea is add the detail later. You add a subdivision, then add more detail. And that is how you improve your mesh. What I will do here is use the standard brush and lazy mouse active. So here, if I create this line very fast, it creates a dot line. And for avoid that, I'll do it very slow. I'll go to stroke and enable the lazy mouse. and add some folds. Not every fold reach the end of the cape, and the cape it is flat. The same for this part in the center. If I go to the middle and try to create a line, the symmetry will create something very weird. We need to be very careful with the symmetry because sometimes when we create a bad stroke, we could damage it without notice about it. And careful with that because a few tools doesn't work without a symmetry option. For example, the C-model brush. I will add a subdivision and I'll proceed to add some folds. And remember, try to model with me and create a very similar Batman as the reference. I just want to create the idea. It will help me at the end for create the final mesh. I will enable the lazy mouse and by using label that brush, very smooth and very soft for improve the aspect of this mesh. Now this mesh isn't the final result. We need to understand the volumes and the basic shapes first. But at the end, when we've used the mask and the cape, we will add more detail. Then create just the final detail and we will finish that subtool. And next class I'll show you how to do the red topology. That red topology could take some time. I guess that I will use 2 classes for it. And after that we will project all and add the details. Without more, see you next class.